Good evening. So in this video I will talk about the concept of rhetorical analysis, and I'm making this video particularly for my students at the Central Department of English, and I'm sharing it through my YouTube channel and social media page with the belief that it can be useful to other people as well. So let's begin by trying to understand what the concept of rhetorical analysis means. So when we do a rhetorical analysis of an argument or any text, we study the element of persuasion in the text. Writers express their viewpoints. Writers say something on certain topic or issues. They make an argument, they make assertions, they make claims, they express their views, and they want their readers or viewers or audience to follow what they are saying, to believe what they are saying, to convince about what they are saying. So to convince the readers, writers use various strategies. For example, Chung-Ri Lee, in his memoir Coming Home Again, narrates a moving story about his sick mother to argue that home is where the whole family is together. N. Fadiman, in her essay The Night Owl, brings a number of scholarly authorities from different fields of science, technology, etc., to argue that when someone sleeps or wakes up is encoded in their genes, so we should accept people as they are. Judith Ortiz Cofer, in her essay More Room, tells the story of her grandmother and the grandfather, and how her grandmother had to give birth to almost more than 10 children, to argue that religion has caused problem to women because Catholic women were not given the access to family control pills, birth control pills. As a result, Cofer's grandmother had to sacrifice her grandfather's sexual love to avoid bearing children. So what do you see? All the writers are saying something. They want us to believe what they're saying, and they use tactics, they use strategies to convince us. And when you do rhetorical analysis, you try to understand how they are trying to convince us. So when we study what tactics writers use to convince us, we become better judges. So rhetorical analysis is a kind of judgment we pass about how convincingly an author is saying what he or she is saying. So as we practice rhetorical analysis, we become better advocates. We might be advocating a side in an issue, and if we are better rhetorical analysts, we can make better advocacy to our argument, to our views. Now, when we attempt rhetorical analysis, we have to hold our agreement or disagreement to what an author is saying. When we read Shangri-La's memoir Coming Home Again, we may disagree with Shangri-La's argument that home is where family is. Or we may agree, but the question is not about agreeing, disagreeing, but the question is understanding how cleverly, how wisely, how persuasively, how effectively Shangri-La tries to convince us. We might be convinced, we might not be convinced, but the question is how effectively he tries to convince us. So, when we do rhetorical analysis, we judge the effectiveness of the argument that a writer is making. We may disagree with the author, but we try to see that even if I disagree with what Shangri-La says, what Fadiman says, what Judith Ortiz Coffer says, somebody else might agree to her, and how. Even if I disagree, I see in rhetorical analysis that even if I disagree writer's viewpoint, it might appeal to other readers. So we try to see how does a writer say something. In rhetorical analysis, we focus on what the writer says, the content, the message, the ideas, the speech, the text. And we try to see how the writer says that. So when we focus on how, we look for rhetorical strategies. Does the writer make emotional appeal like Shangri-La? Or does the writer make logical appeal like Fadiman? Or does the writer make ethical appeal like Fadiman? Or does the writer make emotional appeal like Judith Ortiz Coffer? So in rhetorical analysis, we analyze and judge the artfulness and usefulness of the writer's argument. Let me emphasize here, I have been all the way using the word argument again and again. Dear students, if you do not understand what an argument is, what are the components of an argument, how we write an argument, how we understand an argument, how we analyze an argument, if you do not know argument clearly, you cannot make a good rhetorical analysis, because rhetorical analysis means analysis of the argument that a writer makes. So in rhetorical analysis, we try to see the soundness of an argument. An argument is sound when the reasons and evidences back up the claims the author is making. If the reasons and evidences do not back up the claims, and if the claims are fallacious, then the argument is not sound. So in rhetorical analysis, we try to see the quality of the argument and soundness of the argument. We check if the claims, if the assertions are fallacious. I'm not explaining what fallacy is right here, but to understand an argument, effectiveness of an argument, soundness of an argument, you must understand the concept of fallacies. Then, as we do the rhetorical analysis, we ask the question, what kind of argument is the writer making? Is the writer making an argument on fact? For example, when someone writes about global warming, then they may be making a factual argument because they bring evidences, statistics and data, and they begin by asserting that we are having global warming. It's a fact. They are trying to establish a fact, and they begin with a fact. So we try to understand what kind of argument we are reading. Is it a factual argument? Or suppose somebody is writing an argument about abortion, and the question is whether abortion should be legalized or not. And then they argue that abortion should be banned. Abortion should be banned because it kills life. Then here the writer will have to define what life means, because one can argue that a 2-week, 3-week, 4-week fetus is not life. So first you have to begin by defining what life means, and then only you can move ahead with the argument whether abortion should be allowed or banned. Or a writer can make an argument of evaluation where they judge the effectiveness of some plan or some other things. An argument can also come in the form of proposal. You have some problem, serious problem, and you offer a solution to the problem. You propose a solution. So what kind of argument is the author making? Factual, definition, evaluation argument, or proposal argument? I'm not explaining much right here. In coming videos, I'll explain these concepts. Then we look for the purpose of the argument. Is the writer trying to inform or convince or explore or entertain, make decision or meditate, pray? Is Changri trying to convince us about something, or is Changri trying to entertain us? Is Fadiman exploring a topic deeply, or is Fadiman trying to convince us to accept people as they are? Then we look for occasion of the argument the author makes. For example, some arguments talk about issues from the past, like a murder has taken place and we are arguing who the culprit is. Some arguments talk about future. Parliamentarians debate in the parliament about the next 5-year plan. Or some arguments are about present, what fiscal policy we should have right now. So an argument can be about past, future, present. We should pay attention to this. Then another thing that we pay attention to when we make rhetorical analysis is the audience. For whom is the rhetor speaking? For whom is the writer writing? Is the essay for women? Is the essay for men? Is the essay for children? Is the essay for university scholars? Is the essay for scientists? Is the essay for farmers? Who is the intended audience or implied audience of the argument, and who is the actual audience with flesh and bone reading the argument? Then we look for how does the writer try to convince. How does the writer try to convince the readers? How does he appeal? For example, does the writer use emotional appeal like Changri and Judith Ortiz Coffer? Or does the writer use ethical appeal like N. Fadiman? Does the writer use logical appeal like N. Fadiman? Now we move to the next point of rhetorical analysis, that is, who is making the argument? Here we try to understand the writer's background, the writer's qualification, for example. What is the writer's qualification? What is the writer's credibility? What is the writer's character, ethos? What is his designation? What is his education, learning, position? who is making the argument. When we read something, a speech delivered by Barack Obama, we definitely have one sort of feeling than a speech delivered by our politicians, for example. Then we ask, what authorities is the speaker using? By authorities we mean whenever writers say something, they try to convince us in different ways. For example, Changri Lee brings anecdotes from his father and mother in his story. Changri Lee does not bring any scholarly resource. Unlike that, N. Fadiman brings more than a dozen scholarly authorities. So do you see the difference? Then Judith Ortiz Coffer doesn't bring references like Fadiman because Coffer has another audience in mind, Changri Lee has another audience in mind, Fadiman has another audience in mind. Changri Lee's audience is the city dwellers of New York City who read a family magazine like the New Yorker. Whereas N. Fadiman's audience is scholarly people because Fadiman's essay appears in a journal named the American Scholar, whereas Changri Lee's essay appears in a social family magazine named the New Yorker. So where an essay is published and who the audience is also determines what authorities an author uses. If the readers are scholarly people, then writers bring scholarly authorities. If the readers are not supposed to be scholarly people like university professors and scientists, then authors might not bring scholarly authorities. Authorities are the supports, the quotations, the ideas of other people that writers bring to convince the readers. So what logic they make, what evidences do they bring, hard evidence, soft evidence. Then we look, what claims are the authors making? Are the claims they are making factual? Are the claims persuasive? Are the claims too sweeping that we are not convinced? So what claims they are making, what issues they are raising? For example, Changri Lee seems to be raising the issue of family life in metropolitan cities like New York in 20th century. At the end of the 20th century, Changri Lee shows how all the family members get dispersed for jobs and how elderly people suffer at home. So the issue of the elderly people, issue of the immigrant people in America, Changri Lee raises. Whereas Fadiman raises another issue, the issue of how people's habits are determined genetically and how the deviant people, how those who are don't go with the norm are seen. So what issues they raise and what issues they ignore. Many times writers politically hide certain issues. So can you figure out what are they trying to hide as you attempt a rhetorical analysis? Another thing we look for in rhetorical analysis is kairos. Kairos is the right time to do something. Many times when we say something and if the occasion is not appropriate, then we have bad effect. Our words fail to bring desired effect. So kairos is the right time to do something, the opportune time to do something. And please understand that kairos has narrow meaning as a moment. Actually, I remember reading the story where there is a character in Greek mythology who is running away at light's speed, let's say wind's speed, and somebody grabs his hair and catches him. So just this catching the opportunity, grabbing the opportunity, seizing the opportunity is what kairos means. And kairos can be a moment as well as decade or as well as a century. For example, when Judith Ortiz Coffer in her essay More Room argues that Catholicism has caused suffering to Puerto Rican women because Pope's order issued in 1968 regarding the use of contraceptives, where Pope argued that the purpose of sex, the primary purpose of sex, should be procreation, not pleasure. This has caused exploitation of women, because women like Coffer's grandmother, who were not given an access to birth control mechanism, they had to give birth to 10, 11 children, and her grandmother had to expel her husband from the bedroom to avoid being pregnant, and she had to sacrifice her husband's sexual love and pleasure. So we see that kairos can be a very narrow point, as well as kairos can be a broad, very broad social situation, political situation, cultural situation, economic situation, right? And when what a writer says makes desired effect on the audience, we say the statement is quite kairotic. And when what a writer says fails to make desired effect on the writer, we say the statement or the argument is unkairotic. Then we look for kind of discourse we are reading. A writer may write judicial discourse or forensic discourse. I am not going to explain here what judicial discourse means and what these words mean. I'll do that in another video, because I want to make my video shorter. So I expect you to watch my coming videos in the series. Right now, what I will say, when you attempt rhetorical analysis, pay attention to the kind of discourse. Is it judicial discourse or forensic discourse that discusses something that happened in the past? Is it deliberative discourse, or is it epidactic discourse? For example, Shangri-La's memoir, Coming Home Again, is epidactic discourse because it praises the grandmother. In the same way, when we practice rhetorical analysis, what happens is we develop a rhetorical perspective. What is a rhetorical perspective? Rhetorical perspective is not taking sides, neither this side nor this side, being in between. Rhetorical perspective is avoiding extremes. Rhetorical perspective is, you don't say what is truth. You don't ask, is this true? You don't ask, is this false? What you do is you see how the author is trying to convince you that what he or she is saying is true. The author may fail to convince you, no problem. But you appreciate the attempt, not the final conclusion. So in rhetorical perspective, we are not looking for absolute convictions. We are not looking for truth and falsity. We are not looking for extremes. We are not looking for extreme beliefs. We are not looking for extremes, absolutes. We are looking for best options. We are trying to see what is the best choice in the given situation. Not what is the right choice, not what is the wrong choice, but what is the working choice. What is the choice that can work best in the given situation. A writer can be saying opposite things, but what we are trying to say is that, even though the writer is saying opposite things, but can we make some sense from what he or she is trying to say? Even in the opposing cases, there can be some positive ideas, some merit in what the author is saying. So rhetorical analysis is developing a rhetorical perspective. This is a very important concept which I'll explain in coming videos. So when we practice rhetorical analysis, what happens is that we become more persuasive day by day. In a sense, if you look for a plan if you plan to be a lawyer, then you should study rhetoric. If you plan to be a counselor, you should study rhetoric, because as a lawyer, as a counselor, as a speaker, as a writer, you will have to persuade people. So rhetorical analysis makes us more persuasive in future. And in rhetorical analysis, We focus on the function of something, how well something is functioning. We focus on the usefulness of something. We focus on the potential utility of something, utility of an argument. We ask the question, how did his argument work? How did it function? We ask the question, how can it work better? Right? So finally, when we practice rhetorical analysis, at the end, we become a cautious believer. Those who practice rhetorical analysis, they are not gullible. They can't be easily deceived by people. They can't be easily cheated because they do not easily accept what people are saying. They see very carefully how people are saying. So when you do rhetorical analysis, how, H-O-W, how is very, very important in rhetorical analysis. And when you focus on how, you become very careful. You doubt, you suspect people, you cross-check people, you verify people. You do not believe easily what they're saying. You check. Just a minute. Okay. So you become cautious believer. You don't easily believe. You believe only when you have verified the evidences, reasons. You become a considerate listener. You carefully listen to people. You may disagree with them, but you listen to them. You appreciate their argument. You become careful and effective actor. You think well before you act. You become careful speaker and careful writer. So once again, let me quickly tell you what I talked about in this video. I was explaining you the concept of rhetorical analysis. I feel I may not have explained everything so clearly, but I will pick up these ideas in coming videos and keep making such videos. I wanted to make it short. And so once again, in rhetorical analysis, we study persuasion. In rhetorical analysis, we study how somebody argues, and we become better judgment. We become able to pass better judgment. We become able to make better advocacy. We put off agreement, disagreement. We look for the effectiveness of the argument. We might disagree, but we see, I don't agree with what the author says, but maybe his argument might be appealing other people, and we see how it might appeal other people, and we try to see how the author says what they are saying. We analyze the artfulness and usefulness of the argument. We try to see the quality of the argument. We see the kind of argument, factual argument, definition argument, evaluation argument, and proposal argument. We try to see the purpose of argument, to inform, to convince, to explore, to make decision, to meditate, to pray. Then we see the occasion argument, past, future, present. We see the audience of the argument. We see appeals, emotional appeals, ethical appeals, logical appeals. Then we see who is making the argument, their character, their ethos, their credibility, personality, qualifications, designation, learning, ability. Then we see what authorities they bring, support, scholarly authorities. Then what logic they make, what evidences they bring. Then we look for what claims they make. Are claims acceptable or unacceptable? Then we look for kairos. Is what they are saying relevant to the time? Right? Is it relevant? Many times when we say something, if it is not relevant, it makes no effect. Is it opportune? Does it make any effect? What is the social condition, political condition, historical condition, cultural condition, and do these conditions support what the author is saying? Then what kind of discourse? Judicial, deliberative, epidictic. Then we said that we have to develop rhetorical perspective, and we finally said rhetorical analysis makes us more persuasive, and it makes us cautious believer, considerate listener, careful and effective actor, speaker and writer. Maybe I spoke very fast, but my purpose was just to make you familiar, and I hope that you will Google yourself, you will use your own resources, and I believe that my video will motivate you to study further. If you have any questions, you can ask me in the class, or you can even ask me over my media platform. Thank you for watching. Thank you.